Hello everyone, welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Today we will talk about widgets inside JiGui and we will start implementing our first widget, that is toggle button. Now what is a widget? A widget is a part of your user interface that you can define its behavior and how you want to draw it in an abstract way, and then in future you can call your UI's renderer and ask it to draw an instance of this widget with some special parameters. For example, the easiest one that I can write right now is a toggle button. Now, Minecraft has button class, and if you come back down to your external libraries and find the net Minecraft merge, open it, going to net Minecraft client GUI, here you will see that we have a widget folder, and here you can see lots of widgets that Minecraft is providing. For example, it has a button widget, so if you want to, you can dig into this and read it and understand it and see how it works. For example, I think right now it says that, hey, we have a width and I don't know what is this guy, but can look into the code. And then the height, another unnamed field. OnPress is a method that will be called when you press the button. And then a builder, button widget, onPress method, get narration message, append clickable narration. And this is the builder class, narration supplier, and press action. So you can sit back and read and see how it is working. However, this is a gold mine and it needs time to sit back and understand everything. What we want to do is actually utilize this power and add our own widgets on top of what we have. So I will add a toggle button. Now, toggle button is obviously a button, and if you ever looked into any user interface, being it a Windows user interface or whatever, you see that a toggle button is a button that when you click it, it will turn on, and when you click it again, it will turn off, and it will switch between these two states. So obviously it's a button. We can utilize that button widget that we already showed from Minecraft. This will tell us to create the constructor matching super. Let's see what I need instead of this guy. I need to call this super with everything. However, I want to change things. For a button, yes, we want the X and Y, but we don't need the height. Why don't I need the height? Because the image that I'm gonna use is these things. Okay, for example, this is on off with being colored, or the off state and on state without colors. So I already have specific images that I can use, and those two images have a specific width and height. However, let's keep it there and see what else I don't need. I don't need the text message. Instead of text message, now I will say that send in text dot empty, and this will mean an empty text there. Now on press, of course we need that one, but instead of a press action, I will change it to be a by consumer of a toggle button and a boolean, and we call it onPress. Then we want the narration supplier. However, before these two, I will start accepting other things. One is an identifier for the on state, then another identifier for off state, then another identifier for on selected, and finally one last identifier for off selected, and then the rest of these. For onPress, now we need to change this guy. We will say dollar goes into an empty lambda. This means that we are not gonna do any extra functionality on the press and then narration supplier. On top of these, I need some things, if you recall. First of all, we need to have this consumer, so we call it onPress, and of course we will say this dot onPress equals to the onPress that we sent in. Then we need a boolean, because it's a toggle button. We want to know if we are on or off, and it's a boolean. So we say private boolean and we call it toggled. And here we want a boolean to be here. So boolean default toggled. We may want to start as a toggled, or we want to make it off a state at the start. So we say toggled equals to the default toggle. That's two things. However, I need these four. Let me take it down. There we go. And all of them should be private. Of course, this one is private and it's final now. And these will be actually private private and final, all of them. So semicolon, private final, semicolon, private final, semicolon, and the last one is private final. And I will cut these and I will paste them on top because I want to have the private finals in one place. And finally, we say this dot on state equals to on state. And you are not smart enough to continue with suggestions, are you? Something has changed, and sometimes it's smart because of the plugins that I have. Sometimes it's not. Off state, yeah, as you see, it's not smart enough to suggest anything. Okay, thankfully, I'm not got used to that for a long time. This dot on selected equals to on selected and off selected. So these are being solved. Now I will have an overload of this method that doesn't accept that width and height. Here I will say this, and I will call the other one. So it's x, y, and for the width we will say 32. For the height we will say 16. Then we have the rest. So we have the default toggle, then on state, then off state, then on selected, then off selected, then the on press, and finally narration supplier. This way I can utilize it with my own texture. So why did I add it here? Because someone may want to send something into the system that uses a different texture. Now again, I will have another overload for the constructor, and this time I will remove all these four, and instead I will have the same call. However, now we don't have these. Instead, I have my own constants that I can use, and I call them widget textures dot toggle on. Yeah, let's go with this toggle on, widget textures dot toggle off dot toggle on selected dot toggle off select. The reason I paused for a second is that I have two versions. One is colored and one is not. So I will again go with another constructor, and here I will say that, hey, you know what? I want a boolean that is saying color. Here I will have this again, but instead I will say if we are colored, we want something else, otherwise this guy. And let's see. For the colored, I will go with toggle green for the on, and I will copy this, and here for the off I will go with red, and again here I will go with color green selected, and finally for the off selection we go with red selected. So I gave myself as much flexibility as it's possible for creating this widget. For example, the easiest one is to send X, Y, default toggle, unpressed, and narration supplier. Now I can go even beyond this and remove that default toggle. So I will go with that and remove that default toggle. And here I will call this with the X, Y. And for the default toggle, I will say false. And then the colored, unpressed, and the narration supplier. Okay. So why are you not happy? Because we have a conflict with this one. Now how to solve that? There is absolutely no way. So I will remove this one because in my opinion, this takes first priority, and here I will go with the other constructor, and actually this is the bare minimum. Okay, so we don't have colored and we don't have the toggled, and here instead of colored we will send false. And what is wrong with you? We missed the comma here. So this is the bare minimum constructors. Okay, and honestly I think there is no way to make things more expandable and more user-friendly than what we have already. Now we have everything in the constructor, but we want to do something about onPress. Although, remember, for the onPress, we are doing nothing here, but we need to handle that method. So instead of calling super, we will call a method that is named toggle. Now toggle is something that we will add, and then we say this dot press or onPress as the variable dot accept. The first parameter for the accept is this as the widget itself, and then the second parameter is the boolean, so this dot toggle, and we did define it by consumer, so we want an instance of the class and then the boolean. Okay, now we can move forward with the toggle method. So we say public void toggle. All it's doing, it's negating this toggle. So we say this dot toggle equals to negate itself. So if it was false, now it becomes true. If it was true, now it becomes false. So far we handled internal logic, and yes, we can have more things for this set toggle. Let's add them first, and that is public void set toggle with a boolean that I will call flag. Here we say this dot toggle equals flag. Then we want to get the toggle, so we say public boolean get toggle, and it will simply return this dot toggle. Now I can have 4 more because guess what? We want to have an access to our on and off textures, maybe. So we have on state, off state, okay, public identifier, get on state texture. It will return this on state. Don't forget the return keyword, and I will copy it. This will be off state. So here we send the off state, copy both of them, and then this will be on state selected, and of course on state selected, off state, and off, I think we call it selected. Yes. And that is our getters for those textures. Now we have two more things to do. One of them is to actually render this widget, because without a render call, this is nothing inside the GUI. So I will add that method first, and that is our render widget. Don't need to call this super. Instead, we say screen. Oh, finally, we can use the screen utils dot draw texture, and here we will send in parameters. First, we have the context. That's okay. Then we want to know what texture should we use. Now here is a question. A toggle button has 4 different states, and to do that we need to know if it's toggled, and if it's toggled or not, we want to know the hover state, so if the mouse is on top of it or not. So we say this.toggle. If that is the case, we want to do something, otherwise we want to do something else. Okay, and let's put a comma there because the next parameter is the x. So get x. The next parameter would be get y. So these are the parameters. Don't forget, this part is the texture, and we didn't finish it yet. Because of that, the rest of the IntelliSense is junk, but I want to finish it. So the u and v will be 0 and 0, because as I said, we assume that we are working with our textures. Other than our textures, honestly, a toggle button should start from u and v all the time. And then we want the get width and get height. Then we want the texture width and texture height. Now here is a problem. We assumed that we are using our own textures, okay? But here I am setting the width and height here. So the super call for the width and height is again going another level up and another level up. And you see that this dot width and this dot height is exactly the numbers that we sent in, and these are being retrieved back. So meaning that instead of using a hard-coded number, we can again use the same 2 parameters to retrieve that 32 and 16 or whatever we sent in. And the very last parameter is a color. So we say color helper. Now this color helper comes from Minecraft itself, because we have 2 color helpers. One is from Fabric and one from Minecraft. So we want the Minecraft one, and all we are saying is get white with this dot alpha. Okay, so we get the white color. Now the only problem is here. If we are toggled, we want to have something, otherwise we want to have something else. And I will remove that. Okay, now if we are toggled, we want to check is hovered. If that's the case, we want to send something, otherwise we want to send something else. Same thing is happening here. Now if it's toggled, means that it's turned on. Okay, so in this case we want to send this dot on selected, because we are turned on, so we are using the on, and we are hovered, so the mouse is on top of it, so we use the on selected. Otherwise we want to use this dot on state. Now if we are not toggled, means that we are off, so we go with off selected and then this dot off state, and that is our widget ready to run. And honestly, it may look scary at the start, but trust me, it's not. Okay, what we had done is just draw the texture on the context on the x and y with the u and v, and get width and height both for the u and for the textures and for the drawing, and then finally get the color. And I can move this one to the end of that line, and that's it. So after having all of this, finally we can go forward and say that okay, we are ready to have our last part of business. Now the last part of business is that I want to introduce a builder here. Although I provided lots of constructors, here is the thing: when you have these many constructors, you may think like that, hey, do we really need the builder? Let's take a look. I may remove those constructors that I added all the way, and I may just keep the last one. So let's comment these these guys. The reason that I did add them, I thought that, okay, we can handle them. But then I noticed that we want this narration supplier all the time. And honestly, I think a builder is a better concept here. What is a builder? A builder is a class. And inside that class, you have its own private fields and attributes. Then you have some methods that you call upon them. And as you call these in chained command way, you add more and more information to those attributes. Finally, you will have a method that's called build. And when you call the build, it will return an instance of the original class. Here is a toggle button. And it will call the constructor with all the information that you gave it. Let's start with that. So we have a public class. And builders are always static because we want to say toggle button.builder. And because of that, you need to be static. So we call it builder. Normally, you always call them builder. As I said, you want a method, so public, that returns a toggle button, and you call it build. This is the bare minimum structure of your builder. Of course, here you want to return a new toggle button, okay? However, we don't have any parameters to send in. So because of that, we'll start adding parameters. Okay, the very first one is a private integer x and y. Now that we have the integers, we can go with a constructor. So we say public builder that accepts int x and int y. Here we will say this.x equals to x, this.y equals to y. Then we can use those parameters here, x and y, because we already know that these two are the very first parameters that we want, okay? Then we need a width and height. Of course, I didn't add them here. But what if I go with width and height? Now, as you recall, here is the nice part of things. I can say int width and int height, and of course, I will use this dot width equals to width, dot height equals to height, and then use the width and height here. But what is nice about it? Why did I call it this is the nice part? Because now I can have those constructors that I want, and now I can call this with the x, with the y, and then I can use those hard-coded numbers being 32 and 16. So as you see, although I commented my constructors on top, but I'm starting to use them here, one after another. So let's see, we will need a consumer, although I will need these before the consumers and the default toggled. Well, we will think about them as we go, but let's start with this. By consumer on press. So on press equals to, now here I will give a lambda, and that is button, comma, flag goes into empty lambda, okay? And of course, this is private. I have a private narration supplier, and we call it narration supplier equals to text supplier goes into text.empty. We don't need any narration because the toggle button is only the image. Finally, we will have the rest of the things that we want. First, let's start with private boolean default toggled, and then we want our textures. So let me copy those from top, come back down and add them. These shouldn't be final anymore. Now, we have everything we want for this build. We say, now we want a toggled, default toggled. Then we need the on state, off state, and the stuff. So we have the on state, off state, unselected, off selected. Then we need the unpressed and narration supplier. Okay, unpressed and narration supplier. So the build method is finished. But other than the x, y, width, and height, we are not actually adding anything to the constructor. So instead, we say public that returns the builder class. We want to say onPress, and here we will send in our consumer. Okay, so by consumer of things, and we call it onPress. All we are doing here, we say that this.onPress equals to the by consumer that we sent in, and finally we return ourselves so that we can change the command. And this is the beauty of the builder classes. The next one is the default toggle. But before that, let's do that narration supplier because it's looking into my face. So we need to return the builder. We call it narration supplier. And here we accept a narration supplier, and we call it narration supplier. And the deal is the same thing. We call this.narration supplier equals to the narration supplier, and we return this. So let's copy that part and use it. Then we want to set that toggle. For set toggle, we can return the builder, and we say toggle by default default. Let's do this. This dot toggle by default, or default toggle, equals to true, and we return this. I will have an overload for this, so public builder toggle by default, but here we will accept a boolean flag. This dot default toggled equals to that flag, and we return that this. Alternatively, here we could add another method call, but I will avoid that one. So now we can set our textures. We can do it in different ways, and I will do it as flexible as possible. So I will have a public that returns a builder, and we say set on state with an identifier, call it ID. Of course, at the end we will return this. Now I will copy this guy because we'll use it a lot. This dot on state equals to the ID. Then we have off state. This dot off state equals to the ID. Then we have the on selected. This dot on selected equals to the ID. Off selected. This dot off selected equals to the ID. Now here's the thing. I will say set default textures, and we are not accepting anything. So here I will call return this dot set on state, and here we will change the command dot set off state dot set on selected dot set. Oh, I have a typo here. Okay, off selected. And by doing that, now I can use that widget textures. And because this is the default one, we go with toggle dot off, or here on, and I will copy this one, and we go with toggle dot off, toggle on selected, and toggle off select. Now alternatively, I will have this, and I will say set colored textures, and all I'm doing here, I will return green selected, and red selected. And as you see, now I have the flexibility. The use case example for this would be something like this. We would say a toggle button, for example, button equals to not this. We would say toggle button dot builder dot, actually a new toggle button builder dot, and now I can go with anything I want. Okay, so I can say, for example, set color textures, and here we need the X and Y, so 8 and 16. We set the textures, then we want to say that, for example, what else can I do? Toggle by default, and at the very end, I will call that build. And this will make a toggle button for me and return. Of course, right now, I didn't provide any narrator sublayer. I didn't provide any onPress, and maybe you want to provide your onPress. We will take a look at that later, but that's it basically. This is how simple you can have a widget. And yes, we will add that widget inside any GUI interface, and that widget will automatically call the render widget, and as you see, it's just a render button that will draw the textures for you. So this is our class as it's finished, and we already have our builders. Now take note how simpler it became compared to these, and we don't have any conflict between colored or uncolored anymore, and that's it. So we have everything we need, everything is sitting there. However, this says that make height final. Okay, I may want to have something that is not, yeah, I need to do it this way. Let me see. Okay, public builder that says set width, or actually we don't even need the set, so width that says this dot width equals to width, and then return this. Of course, we need to have that parameter, so int width, and then I will have the height, so this dot height equals to height, and finally the x and y. Now the x and y, do I want to have a parameterless constructor, like, I don't know, a constructor that accepts nothing, even not x, like so, and then I will have something that says it's x and int x, so x and one last parameter, y. And this way I have all the things, although normally you would want to do this, but you know what, I don't know. Stop debating myself. I can say add one more, and this is called add default, what should I call it? Add default size, and here we say this dot width equals to 32, this dot height equals to 16, and I will get rid of this part now. And instead we will say this dot x, actually I have it, I think. Don't I have that one? For the width and height, I will go with 0 and 0. So I'm just adding a constructor with the x and y so that you can add the default size and get rid of everything. Okay, and let's move that constructor up so that we can see all the constructors in one place. And finally, this is a builder. builder. So if you never knew how to write a builder, it's simple. Just have a public static class with some attributes that are private, some constructors that set some of them, and then just return the builder and call some methods to assign values to those parameters. Don't forget that you will return this, and at the end you will have a build method that returns an instance of the actual main thing. Here it's the toggle button class. This is toggle button widget. I think actually it's really complete now and we don't need to do anything else with it. We'll take a look at usage examples maybe in future. Now take note, some of it was produced by other people. Maybe I think Turkey had something like this and other people have something like this, but this is my design. I remember that Turkey had another record here and was using a record. I don't use that because I think easy enough to do something like this in one go. I will name it for myself, I don't think that it should be assigned to Turkey. Anyway, this is the toggle button. In the next video, we will come back and move something that we have in our main mod right now. Of course, the main mod is broken right now because we have removed every dependency. But if I come back to the gem cleaner screen renderer, you see that we have this, the fluid, and then inside the fluid handler, I'm calling the render tile sprite. And this is actually rendering a fluid, okay? Instead of this, as I said in the main series, we can add a drawable, and this is a widget. So we can have our fluid widget, and the fluid widget will draw the fluid for us without a problem. Now, instead of going with a background for the fluid background, then the drawings of the content, and then the fluid markers, I will do it in one go, okay? And hopefully, I'm not sure if the widget has render background or not, but we can take a look at that and see how things go, because I want to have it in one complete widget style. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.